Most surprising part of Wednesday for you, LSU landing Harold Perkins or missing out on the other three that were on the board, the primary three?
The thing that just totally I guess got me that I didn't see coming at all was Cervante Citizen to Miami.
Yeah.
I thought he was going to go to Florida, and so for Miami to kind of scoop in there that late and get him in there, Mario Cristobal, we always heard about how good of a recruiter he was, and we knew how good he was at Oregon when he was at Miami as an assistant, and to get in there and to get that job done in quick fashion like that. That was pretty impressive, but I think going as crazy as it sounds, is going into signing day like that night. It was like Harold Perkins. I could feel the optimism and hear the optimism coming from the LSU side, but then there was that part of me that says, "Man, you can't trust anything with this recruitment." When you've got families that are at odds, and you've got some tussling that you want him over here, some tussling that you want him over here. You never know how those are going to turn out. But the Jacoby Matthews thing was probably one of the weirdest, to break it down like that. And that's strictly because, LSU had some reasons to feel confident even as early as Wednesday morning. And then, it seemed like with the flip of a switch, it was just like sources told us it's over. And we're like, what? Really that quick? And you knew Texas A&M was surging from the night before. But you figured that, okay, LSU had overtaken Texas A&M in his recruitment. LSU was kind of, inching out a little bit more after the official visit and stuff like that. And so that was probably the weirdest, is just seeing how quickly that flipped on a dime.
Was he the biggest miss, Matthews, for LSU out of the state this year? They lost the four top pass catchers, and they lost Matthews. Who was the biggest miss this year?
It's a close one. If you look at it from a need standpoint, having those receivers would be nice, but look at LSU's depth chart at receiver right now. It's loaded. You look at running back. You've got 6 running backs in the room if you count Josh Williams as being one of them, if he's still on scholarship. And so Trevante Citizen going to Miami, I think he's going to be a good college back, and I think he's going to have a really nice career. But when you look at the running back room at LSU, I don't think they're going to miss a beat. Danny Lewis is one that from a need standpoint, LSU just really needs tight ends in the worst kind of way. But he was probably 2 years, maybe 3 down the road from really being an impactful guy in the SEC. Whereas Jacoby Matthews, even with LSU's safety depth, I think he would have come in there, and I think he would have come in there, and he could have helped you out. Yeah. I think he could have come and helped you out, and not only from the safety standpoint, but he's also a guy that he's always been borderline linebacker. He's kind of had to fight and work to keep his weight down. So he's a guy who could easily get up to 210, 215 pounds in college, in my opinion. And so he's one of those guys. With the transfer portal the way it is now, I like versatility, and I like versatility for a couple of reasons. Okay, if you're not making it a safety, you can put on 10 pounds and play some linebacker. Okay, I have a chance to keep you out of the transfer portal now. If you're a safety all the way, you're not seeing any progress. You're not seeing any room to move up. You can't play nickel. You're very, you don't offer the position versatility that some other players do. Well, then I'm probably going to lose you to the transfer portal. And so I really think that going forward, you're going to kind of start seeing not more of an emphasis made in terms of who they recruit or how they recruit, but I think you're going to see more of a little bit of an emphasis into some of these guys who can play multiple positions. Because college football, in my opinion, it has gone to where you never really – you had Champ Bailey who played offense, plays and defense, but you've never really had that many guys. Woodson, a few guys, Stingley. There was talk he could end up doing it, but he never did. But you have never really had those guys who really played both ways. And I wonder if that could be one of the waves coming up, within the next 5 or 10 years, that you start seeing more guys actually playing both ways. And I wonder if some of that's going to have to do with the transfer portal and guys just being a little more flexible as far as their positions go.
John Quavi has a question for Sonny. Hashtag Ask Sonny. He asks, Sonny, What's the LSU offensive line prospects for 2023 looking like? What's the state of offensive line in Louisiana looking like in this cycle?
Well, I tell you what, it's actually not looking bad at all. And if you can do that 2 years in a row, that's good. You know, you've got over at Dallas outside of New Orleans, you've got a big offensive tackle, Caden Jones. Ed Orgeron and his staff offered him after he worked out at camp last summer. I haven't heard if he has been re-offered by the new staff, but I have a suspicion that he will. I mean, 6'7", 275, 280 pounds. Doesn't have a lot of fat on him or anything. You know, really has that good-looking body that you want to see in some mesh protectors. A lot of length, some flexibility. St. Aug, there's a kid at St. Aug, an offensive tackle that LSU just offered over there. You've got a big monster up at Neville High School, Zalance Herb. We've got him as a defensive tackle right now, I think in the database, but he plays both ways. But he's the guy. I think he's going to be one of the nation's best offensive tackles. So when you look inside the state, there's really some good pieces for LSU to start off with and to kind of work around and build around.
Sonny Shipp is joining us here from Go247. Make sure you are following him on Twitter at Sonny Shipp to keep up with the latest of what's going on in recruiting. Sonny, the 15 high school kids that they signed in this cycle, I know that there was a need for more and that the state was very healthily talented in this recruiting cycle. But when you look at the 15 they got, how much quality did they get in those signings?
Well, I think they got a lot of quality. I think when you start looking at, when you're looking at guys who could potentially play early, I think there's several guys in that class. I think you start on the offensive line. You look at Will Campbell, Emory Jones. Those are two guys who have always been a little bit advanced as far as relative to other people in their class and that they played against. And so you wonder if that's going to continue to happen as they get into LSU. I think that both of them with LSU's situation on the offensive line. You've got so many guys who have never stepped up who are now going to have to be asked to step up. You guys like Thomas Perry, Cardell Thomas. You could go down the list of guys like that, Anthony Bradford, and so on. And so I think Campbell and Emory Jones, if they come in and if they're getting with it and if they're hitting the weights and if they really take the off season training program as serious as I think they will. I think both of them are going to have just as good of a chance to get in there and to make an impression on Brad Davis and Brian Kelly, just as easy as the other guy, the older veterans who are going to be there. And then I think when you start looking at, you look at a guy like Harold Perkins and you think about how Matt House used Josh Allen, and then you go back and you watch Harold Perkins' highlights and you see how much he rushes off the edge, you see how fast he is, how athletic he is, how dynamic he is. I think it's going to be hard to keep him off of the field. Michael Baskerville, it's great that he came back. Is he going to be eligible? That's going to be a big question that he's going to have to, answer over this spring and into the summer and stuff. But, assuming that he is, you think him and Mike Jones have the best chance of starting. But, let's say that Michael Baskerville, he doesn't get his academics in order. Now, all of a sudden, Harold Perkins is a guy who could potentially be tossed in there with Mike Jones. And so I think he's another impact guy that you have to circle. And then, really, like I was telling somebody yesterday, any cornerback with a pulse who's on the roster is going to have a chance. Granted, the transfers are going to have a leg up and the experience factor and all of that. But, if you're a cornerback, you got to feel good about your chances of at least making the 3D. I think there's only 6 on scholarship right now, So there are some. I think there's several. There's several places to where guys from this class are going to come in and who are going to have a chance to get on the field in year one of Brian Kelly.
They have 6 spots remaining. Do you think that they fill those after spring? 5. I'm sorry. Yes, 5. Do you think they fill those after spring?
I do.
Yeah.
I do. And I think when you go through and when you look at the roster, I think it's all about, you're trying to add some depth now. The odds of getting a really, an impact star you might be able to get one who decides to leave after the spring, but I think you're probably going to be looking at situations to where you're adding guys for depth. You're adding guys who have multiple years of eligibility left. You look at tight end, you look at cornerback, you look at linebacker, you look at the offensive line. I mean, if there's an interior offensive lineman out there who can play center, absolutely. I mean, work an NIL deal up for that dude, man. Jordy Culotta, get in the game. Come on, man.
No doubt. I mean, because it's like you say with cornerback. If there's a center in sight, he can play. You can play.